Hello, and welcome to Eastern Geeks Out, an EP Media associated podcast where I'll be discussing news and interesting topics in the gaming and entertainment world. My name is Deforest White, and I'll be your host for the duration of these episodes. This is our second episode, and I'm happy to be here after a couple weeks. Last time we talked about the news from the, I believe it was beginning of this month. We had a Nintendo Direct with a lot of big reveals there. And there's been some very interesting gaming news that's come out over the past couple weeks. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. First of all, on the Capcom side of things, the most obvious story to me at least, Capcom put a little 7-day countdown on their site. It was very nonchalant, not really an announcement behind it or anything. I think they may have posted to Twitter after it had been there for a day already, but just a nice black-gray background with just a white clock overlay over top of it. And there was a lot of speculation as far as what it could be. Some people thought it was going to be a new Resident Evil game because of the clock aesthetic. Some people were thinking it was going to be something related to Pragmata, which Capcom has actually now pushed back to a 2023 release date. Still PS5 exclusive to my knowledge. Some people were thinking it was going to be a reboot of some sort. I know there were a couple of us crossing our fingers that somehow it would mean the rejuvenation of the Darkstalkers franchise, but that could never happen. And of course, the most obvious and the one that ended up being true was Street Fighter 6. The countdown actually coincided with the end of Capcom Cup, the Street Fighter League, and after Grand Finals occurred, there was a grand reveal. And first of all, before Street Fighter 6, they actually did reveal the Capcom Fighting Collection, which, funnily enough, actually sort of does rejuvenate the Darkstalkers franchise, with, if I'm not mistaken, the first 3 games in the series being available. And this is a big deal because Darkstalkers hasn't seen a new release since the PS3 era, and even then it was pretty early on. The franchise has been largely stagnant and not present through things other than Marvel vs. Capcom, and even that was fairly bare bones representation. You got Morrigan for the most part, and sometimes you get one or two other characters, but fairly background, not a ton. There are a couple other games in the collection that were of interesting note. Particularly, you got Cyberbots. Jin Saotoma, he's getting a light in the spot. Getting time in the spotlight, which hasn't happened in a good while. That's, for those people who aren't familiar, Cyberbots was a mech fighting game in which players would do 1v1 2D mech fights, and the series never really got off its feet. The original arcade game wasn't super popular. However, it's received more recognition as a result of Jin Saotome, the protagonist of the game, being present outside of his mech in games like the original Marvel vs. Capcom, and then again in Marvel vs. Capcom 2. He's kind of the hype beast type. Very fun. He actually also got a skin for Ryu in Street Fighter V Championship Edition, so you may recognize him from there. Outside of that, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 and Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix are both being included in the Fighting Collection. These two kind of go hand in hand. Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix is a more traditional 2D fighter than Super Puzzle Fighter 2, but it's still very much a cutesy, chibi art style. You beat your opponent up, gems fly out of him, you run around, you collect the gems give you bonuses that allow you to build meter. Personally, I enjoy these types of games along with the Neo Geo Pocket Color era, because you end up with these really intricate fighting systems that wouldn't normally be allowed in such a weird, concise manner. So this speaks to me on a fundamental level of just some nice recognition. Super Puzzle Fighter 2, though, that's a weird one. If you've never seen the game, it's just straight up not really a fighting game. It's closer to Tetris Attack or Yoshi's Cookie than anything else, where you have two people playing essentially Tetris, or for those more familiar with it, Angry Drunken Dwarves, where you have like uh, 1 by 2 pieces that are coming down from the top of the screen, and as you like make rectangles with the gems that are coming down, they will merge together, and the idea is to get chain reactions and large crystals to where you can get big combos, and then as you do that, garbage gems will be thrown onto your opponent's side, and they'll have to deal with the ramifications of that. Whoever gets to the top of their screen first loses, a la like Puyo Puyo Tetris rules. So it's honestly a pretty interesting game. It's a very experimental thing that Capcom did. The name itself is actually just a joke because it's Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, but there was never like a Super Puzzle Fighter 1. They just released it like that as like an homage to Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, because, why wouldn't you? The last game in the Capcom Fighting Collection that I wanted to take particular mention of, Red Earth. Now, Red Earth is a game that, don't lie, none of you have heard of, because Red Earth was an arcade exclusive Capcom fighter for the longest time. It's more of like a fantasy setting, somewhat similar to the Darkstalkers franchise, but instead of taking the whole like horror route where everyone's like these dark, creepy, like weird nightcrawler creatures, you end up with like lion head man and person who is dragon. It's a very like goofy, like sort of pseudo post-apocalyptic game, but it's very intriguing seeing this one in particular get a release with Capcom Fighting Collection, not only because it's going to be like the first ever official console release, but also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this is the first time like that you're ever going to be able to play this particular game in an online environment, like in any official capacity. Of course, there are tools like Fightcade that FGC players will use to play arcade games that are just being emulated on PC together. However, that is still technically piracy, so it's a big deal for a game like Red Earth to get an official release with online capabilities. And not just that, unlike what they did for the Street Fighter 30th anniversary collection, all of these games that are being released in Capcom Fighting Collection are going to have online capability. There's 10 games here, and every single one of them is going to be running, if I'm not mistaken, whole rollback netcode, which is fantastic. It's great that we're taking more of a direction away from delay-based netcode, and we're establishing rollback as the norm. You gotta thank Skullgirls for that with GGPO. You gotta thank Guilty Gear Strive for that with Arc System Works. There's so much that can be done with rollback that's only just now being taken advantage of, and that gives me great hope for Street Fighter 6, which of course was the other big reveal from the Capcom site countdown. The trailer for Street Fighter 6 is not too revealing beyond what we already knew about the game. I mean, I can give you like a shot-by-shot analysis. You got Ryu. He's standing there. He's got his beard back. As a pre-order bonus for Street Fighter V, there was a skin where Ryu had his shirt off and a whole beard. And the fan bases collectively started referring to it as Hot Ryu. I say that as if it's not like a few years old by now. But yeah, Hot Ryu is now the official standard look of Ryu. His chin got way wider. He's a beefy boy. And he's standing in a dark room, and Luke is there. Y'all know Luke, right? For those of you who weren't following Street Fighter V, Luke was the final DLC character in the final season. And the final season actually wasn't originally supposed to happen, but because development with Street Fighter VI was going slightly behind schedule, the developers of Street Fighter V elected to put in a new DLC season, starting with the fan favorite joke character Dan, who was super broken when he came out, by the way, had a whole infinite. So it was Dan, followed by Rose from the Street Fighter Alpha series, followed by Oro from Street Fighter 3, followed by Akira from Rival Schools, a guest character, followed by, finally, Luke, who had never been seen before and was revealed to us as a Street Fighter 6 character appearing in Street Fighter 5, which is a bit weird. It's very... There's not really been a precedent in the past for guest characters to appear in games prior to their own inception. The only example I can think of off the top of my head that falls in that category would be Corrin being released for Smash 4 back in the 3DS Wii U era, prior to Fire Emblem Fates being available to Western audiences. So, I mean, that's really the only example I can think of. But, yeah, Luke has actually quite good gameplay in Street Fighter V. He's something of a Shoto, but with a bit more focus on Rushdown. And assuming that he keeps most of his game plan from that game, we can assume that we're going to see lots of gameplay elements that Luke had show up in Street Fighter 6. Now, I don't know if that's going to be like taking advantage of things like Luke's V skills, which powered up, made his arms all beefy and gave him more powerful versions of his own moves. I don't know if that's going to be implemented with the whole cast or if that's just a Luke thing. It could also be the case that Luke has an entirely new moveset that's not reliant on any of the systems from Street Fighter V. I would be incredibly surprised if Street Fighter 6 saw the continuation of the V-Skill V-Trigger system. But yeah, as for the rest of the trailer, Luke stands there looking all smug, Ryu stands there looking all Ryu, they take a swing at each other, and we get a logo. And it's SF with a 6 next to it. Honestly, the logo is kind of underwhelming, but you know, maybe we'll grow into it. Maybe it'll have like a better logo when it's like the whole name. I know King of Fighters 15 elected to have like KOF 15 as their logo, and then the subheader of King of Fighters, which, you know, I'm not against. KOF is a very pretty game. For those of you who haven't been playing it, you need to get on that. But yeah, I'm very excited to see where Capcom takes this. And as for the rest of the FGC, I mean, I guess it's our turn to watch. There hasn't really been any Tekken news recently. The final DLC season ended like back during quarantine times. I mean, after the Polish president's in the game, where do you go from there? We don't have any Tekken 8 news or anything about, like, Tekken Tag Tournament 3, if that's happening. After that, the only other, like, prominent FGC news, Dragon Ball FighterZ. So, Dragon Ball FighterZ saw the release of a standalone DLC character. It is Labcoat Android 21. She is not included in any DLC seasons. She's kind of in that same like standalone area as like Eliza was in Tekken 7, where you just gotta buy her on her own. And while I'm very excited to have continuing DLC for Dragon Ball FighterZ, I must confess I have a bit of a worry here that Dragon Ball FighterZ is going to fall into the same trap that Dragon Ball Xenoverse, or specifically Xenoverse 2, did, where instead of working on a new game and releasing a new title in the series, they're just going to continuously release like standalone character DLC for years down the line. And while I'm not against that in theory, I don't think it's overall good for the state of the game. Just adding characters and not making adjustments to game systems or balance for the rest of the cast, or like adding new mechanics, or taking old mechanics that weren't quite working, looking at you, Super Dash, and adjusting them. Without any of that, it's going to be very difficult for Bandai Namco and Arc System Works to maintain a healthy game environment. However, we have been shown time and time again that the development team behind Fighters actually legitimately cares about their audience, cares about the competitive scene, cares about the casual scene. So I don't think that these things will go unnoticed. I also don't think that we won't see a Dragon Ball Fighters 2. I'm just worried that by adding a long series of consecutive standalone DLCs, that the game will essentially stagnate and falter in place. We've got like games like Skullgirls Second Encore that have been receiving after years of just not having anything, kind of in the same way that Dragon Ball, like we were all 100% certain that was done until 21 was announced. Like it went for years without having any DLC, and then all of a sudden Skullgirls is like, hey, we've got a season coming out, y'all want it? And everyone just kind of went, oh, yeah, yes please, yeah. And that's pretty cool, honestly. We got Annie of the Stars, who is a very important character for lore, and then Umbrella, the younger sister of Parasol, who was actually originally in the beta version of Skullgirls prior to its inception as the current, like, absolute hand-drawn beauty that we all know now. But the difference between these is that when Skullgirls announced DLC, they announced a whole season. You get, like, you can buy characters individually, but you also get, like, more for your money with that. And the game as a whole is being consistently updated, and I'm worried that Dragon Ball Fighters is going to become sort of the same thing that Xenoverse 2 was, where there is this very, like, tight-knit community around the game, and no one else will touch it with a 10-foot pole. Outside of the FGC, for those of you who didn't come here for fighting games and nothing else, Horizon Forbidden West released. I have not had the chance to play it, so I cannot offer my personal review of the game. However, reception seems to be very positive. There's a few bugs here and there, but ultimately, Horizon Zero Dawn was a beautiful game, and Horizon Forbidden West is a more beautiful game. Unless you're Donkey. Those of you who didn't catch that, he released a video talking about less problems that he had with Horizon specifically, and more problems that he had with open world games in general, because everything's open world now, including but not limited to Pokemon. So having that on the horizon and being like sort of at the precipice of this great era of everything's open world, you lose some of that sense of wonder. And I understand that criticism, and it is a legitimate stance that I won't fault. However, am I still gonna buy Horizon Forbidden West? Yeah, probably. I'm like, it might be a while because I haven't beaten Zero Dawn yet. I'm currently in the middle of it. That tower scene, though. There's a lot that can go wrong with games like these, but honestly, the Horizon team seems to have it down. Aloy is a very compelling character that I personally resonate with a lot, and the gameplay in terms of like the mech fighting is super, super fun, and the world itself is fun to traverse. So I'm honestly excited to see where they take it from here. Looks like there's a bit more of an underwater focus on the game this time, which is always fun for me to see because I'm that one singular person who enjoys water levels. It's me. Hi. If you would like to crucify me, good luck. You got to catch me first. But outside of that, I don't really have a whole lot to talk about. We still don't have anything in terms of Breath of the Wild 2 news, so not much to go off of there. Um, yeah, that's the past couple weeks summed up for you. If you have any topics that you would like us to cover, you can contact me at deforest_white124 at mymail.eku.edu. Or if you have questions for the podcast as a whole, you can contact our broadcasting director, Ryan, at ryan_gum1 at mymail.eku.edu. And you can also contact the Eastern Progress on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, at The Eastern Progress on Facebook and at Eastern Progress on the other two. You can also find not only this podcast, but all of our other works and articles at www.easternprogress.com. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll keep in touch with you. See you in 2 weeks.